It was a joyous day in the Prendergast household in the year 1994. At the time, I was too young to be in school, so I was at home on my couch with a bag of Cheetos in one hand and the TV remote in the other. I looked at the clock and noticed it was time for the Mr. Rogers Show. Also realizing that it had already been on for 3 minutes, I shouted, "Holy shnikes, I hope I didn't miss any of it." I quickly flipped the channel to the PBS and began to watch. This was the first domino to fall in the eventual outcome of the events that would later occur in the upcoming minutes. Immediately as Mr. Rogers' face appeared on the screen, my belly tingled with excitement. It was either excitement or the many bags of Cheetos I had already devoured. I resituated myself into watching position and pulled up my sleeve on my cotton Power Ranger pajamas, with footsies, so I could reach deeper into the bag of Cheetos. The childhood humor of the show tickled me with its various puppets and imaginary places that only a coked-up hippie could think of. As I watched, Mr. Rogers began to talk about emergency safety. I took into a gaze and noticed that his neck skin danced with every word he spoke. He continued to say that if there is trouble or an emergency, you should call 911. This puzzled me and immediately proved false a song that says to call the Ghostbusters in these situations. However, to me, all I heard Mr. Rogers say was, Tim, go call 911. From then on, I don't remember much, but now I can tell that I had been put under the hypnotic spell of Mr. Rogers. I made my way into the kitchen and picked up the phone. My little 5-year-old mind figured that if I called 911, someone would come for help, and that someone would be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So then I dialed those 3 digits and expected to hear an answer from my pizza-eating friend Donatello. The line started to ring, and a nasally voice picked up.
Hello, 911 emergency. What is your emergency?
I froze, my heart pounding. I could not utter a word.
Hello, are you alright?
Clank. I slammed the phone down and frantically ran back into the TV room for refuge. All this time, my mom had been in the garage for 5 minutes fixing something in the car. When she came back in the house, I sat there as if nothing happened. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door, and my mother answered it. It was the Popo, the 5-0, a black and white, was parked right in front of my house. As I hid behind my makeshift fort, I heard the 2 grown-ups exchanging conversation, with a tone of anxiety coming mostly from my mother. I was then called out by my mother, and I slowly walked to our front door, where my fate awaited me. They asked me if I called 911, and after a long silence, I confessed that I did indeed call the fuzz. The officer then continued to tell me how I was only supposed to use that number in emergencies and such. My mother apologized to the pig, and then the cop left, probably to get some donuts or something. My mom closed the door, and then turned around to give me a look that gave you the feeling that you'd just been punched in the bowels. There was fire in her eyes, and had such big wrinkles in her forehead they looked like ditches that you could probably hide in case of a tornado. I knew right then that I possibly could be grounded for 2, maybe even 3 weeks. She began on her tirade, showering me with her saliva every time she opened her mouth. Calling me a little twit, she said that I should have known better. But in the midst of the battlefield, I used my quick thinking and pulled out the waterworks. It was only a matter of seconds before she completely stopped yelling and loosened her grip on my neck. Breathing for the first time in the last minutes, I was relieved that I got off the hook. After a while of consoling each other, the eventual punishment for me was 1 week without watching Power Rangers, which at the time seemed like a reasonable deal. Looking back, it could have been Mr. Rogers who hypnotized me and made me call the cops, but I acted mature and took full responsibility for the sweater-wearing punk. Despite the fact that I was only 5 at the time, I really wish I should have known better, because that week without Power Rangers was hell. Although I learned my lesson, I wouldn't have really changed much about that day, except maybe tell the cops Mr. Rogers molested me or something.